Everyone. My name is Alfredo Vicencio Vieira. I'm part of CIP's Evaluation and Learning Initiative. And this is a very exciting TCLP working session for us for multiple reasons. The first one is because it's already the 15th working session that we've had, which is already a huge milestone for us. We've been having this on a monthly basis for a long time already. The second one is because it touches upon two topics that we're very interested about. We believe that it's fundamental for CIP's delivery and transformational change. One of them is programmatic approach, the other one is content platforms. And those are particularly relevant under CIP's new strategic directions that focus on country leadership. As some of you are already familiar with it, CIP's programmatic approach goes beyond the project level and focuses on system changes that try to strengthen country ownership, enhance coordination of diverse partners, and maximize impact of transformational change. And in this working session today, we have Ross Strategic um, basically presenting on a coping study that they're developing right now to explore the key structural tensions and challenges that programmatic approaches and the different experiences that there are around it, particularly in relation to supporting country platforms. Today we'll have Tim Larson and Sibe, who are very close to the TCLP, and some of you might already know they're part of the raw strategic and facilitation team for us. But without further ado, I would like to pass it on to Nasibe, please.
Thank you, Alfredo. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to see you and meet you. As Alfredo mentioned, my name is Nasibe Chemor, and we're really happy today because we get to share a piece of work that we have been developing for a little bit of time that is focused on learning from experiences, implementing programmatic approaches, and also sort of connecting that and exploring future directions to support countries in developing these innovative financing models, including country platforms. So if we can go to the next slide. So this paper comes at a time when countries are requesting more aligned, more impactful climate finance and more sort of like results oriented rather than process oriented. And in this climate, programmatic approaches are gaining traction, of course, provided that the funding is being delivered in a more cohesive and more strategic way with programs instead of one-off projects, right? But we're also seeing a rise in blended finance mechanisms, including country-led platforms, which adds complexity to the whole climate finance architecture, right? So what this paper tries to do is, look back at how the programmatic approach from the Climate Investment Fund and others has worked, and it also sort of lays out these emerging questions on how these models can work better together, especially in environments, as it is now, that involves many stakeholders and many sources of finance in many contexts at once, right? So in the end, this paper tries to create a platform for future dialogue, and also it wants to help to design improvements and deepen research, looking first at the CIF Secretariat and then at other partners operating these models. So I feel we should start with what is a programmatic approach in the next slide, right? According to the CIF, what is it? The programmatic approach is a core feature of the initial design of the CIF programs since 2008, if I'm not mistaken. It was quite a shift away from one-off climate projects towards a model that is more strategic and more country-led. At its heart, it's about building investment plans that tie together multiple projects under a unified vision. And it is led by the government, is shaped through stakeholder consultations, and it's heavily and has ongoing support from multilateral banks and the CIF Secretariat itself, and overseen by donors. But the main thing is that it was aimed to respond to not only the original country needs, but it was aimed to evolve as the country context was evolving. So this model promotes coordination, impact at the long term, and country ownership. And it tries to span across sectors, works at national, subnational, local levels. It wants to align with countries' climate commitments like the national determined contributions, the national development plans, and national adaptation plans, and others depending on the context and of course of the program. So more than just bundling projects together, the idea was to create a shared strategy that was targeting transformative potential, right? So in this paper, we try to gather what are the benefits of the programmatic approach, no? And for that, we looked at some of the evaluations that were made for the CIF programs. And if we can go to the next slide, please. Thank you. So these evaluations of the CIF programmatic approaches show that first, that it offers lower transaction cost and stronger policy alignment, and also a critical value lies in the predictability of funding, and more about this later. When countries know that the resources are available over time, they're sort of, the observation was that they're more willing to plan in a more ambitious way, in a more innovative way, and in a more adaptable way, right? Also, the programmatic approach can help attract significant co-financing for the reasons that I just said, and enables significant reforms, particularly in the sector of energy and land use. Reforms in those policies, and this is because, sorry, one of the main features is faster institutional alignment, right? So in more challenging country context, the programmatic approach has boosted coordination, it has strengthened capacities, has ensured that climate initiatives remain embedded across sectors, and perhaps one of the most powerful benefits that the evaluations can confirm is that the programmatic approach delivers results that are bigger and outcomes that are bigger than what isolated projects ever could. They became a platform for systemic change, for transformational change, and of course, for adaptive management. But also, through our literature review and also from conversations with CIF staff and other CIF partners, we also managed to explore some key structural tensions and challenges that can affect how programmatic approaches are designed and implemented. For the next slide, please. So first, a major barrier is funding, and I know that I said that the programmatic approach allows for predictable and sufficient resources, but also it is not enough, and this is not a surprise to anyone. If resources don't match the country's ambition, well, the transformational goals can't happen, right? So even though this was recognized as a strength for the programmatic approach, it was understood that further work is required to ensure that countries get envelopes that are sufficient and opportune, right? And this is not an easy feat because aligning all these players, MTVs, governments, civil society, donors, requires active coordination and also shared incentives. And while the programmatic approaches are known to bring structure to country investments, they also need to stay flexible to adapt to the changing context, as I said, to walk with the countries in their evolving situations without losing coherence. And this is quite a delicate balance we have found. Monitoring systems are another pressure point. because without solid mechanisms, implementation tends to revert to this silo mentality, project by project execution. And that happen, I mean, that can make the sort of programmatic lens get lost in implementation, which is something that, I mean, this is a latent challenge that actually happens a lot. Additionally, fragmentation and weak continuity, especially when new actors come in during the implementation phase, this can affect integration and can affect impact of the programs. So we learned that to help with these gaps, capacity building and more clear processes can actually help keep coherence and continuity. Something that we heard in our conversations with CIF partners is that strong champions and identifying these strong champions and also creating platforms to elevate their voices is critical to keep focus and to keep the long-term goals, especially through political transitions. So these champions can be found in ministries, can be found in multilateral banks or even national development banks, civil society, other government institutions, and also at the grassroots levels. But it is important to create platforms that are accessible for them to really make a difference in how the implementation and the design of programmatic approaches is happening. Also, sort of a double-edged sword, urgency is needed to address the climate crisis, but also sometimes the timelines, sorry, can be so fast that can squeeze out, in a way, meaningful stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder engagement and participation and consultation is a basis of programmatic approach, but you don't want it to become just a box that you check. You need to have ongoing consultation that is meaningful to have a program that truly responds to what the country or the region needs. And finally, quite a few countries express that they need more technical support and funding to design and operationalize these approaches effectively. But what they mean is not more money to the project, but more money to the actual implementation of the programmatic approach. So the mechanisms can be set in place for the programs to actually to operate in a seamless way. This is outside of the main investment envelope. I'm gonna stop here and give the floor to Tim to tie us up into, what does the programmatic approach mean in terms of country platforms?
Great. Thanks so much, Nasibe, and it's great to be here with you all today. Before I touch on country platforms, I just want to reference that one of the things we try and do in the scoping study that will be hopefully out soon is the CIF is not the only, or the Climate Investment Funds is not the only institution that's been implementing a programmatic approach. And so what we try and do is look at key similarities and differences across different institutions that are taking that approach. And those include the Global Environment Facility, the Green Climate Fund. The World Bank has a multi-phase programmatic approach, among other institutions. So it's kind of emerged as a common phenomena or approach to organizing how different multilateral institutions try to interface with countries. And but it looks a little bit different in these different institutional contexts. So that's part of the conversation that we're trying to tee up and explore about where are those similarities and differences. Many of you may have heard of the concept of country platforms. It's become quite popular, particularly over the last year. It's been championed over several years by the G20, the governments of Brazil and South Africa, among many others, as kind of an enhanced approach to really, from a country perspective, build these collaborative platforms that enable multiple different actors, including multilateral institutions and the private sector, to connect to, in effect, implement a programmatic approach at a country level. And there's a lot of interest in these. I think there's some arguments about, is this old wine in a new bottle, or is this really something new and different? But in an era where I think countries are struggling to um, coordinate multiple streams and flows of finance and to mobilize new and innovative flows, it has emerged as kind of a focal point for that type of coordination to address fragmentation, to enable more coherent multi-partner coordination, to help ensure that there's policy alignment work in addition to the focus on an enabling environment work in addition to the finance on or focus on finance mobilization, and to really breathe some strong country leadership and ownership into these platforms, and just enable more efficient and effective coordination of multiple streams of capital, multiple types of capital into blended finance mechanisms. And so there's been lots of interest and excitement around this, and multilateral development banks and international finance institutions, including the multilateral climate funds, such as the CIF, um, are being encouraged to connect with these and also seeing it as an important opportunity to help further their programmatic approach. We can go to the next slide. And so there are actually quite a few country platforms that have emerged. I think most recent count that I've seen is around 10. We've listed some examples there, and it's interesting to note that uh, they're not just focused on energy transformation, but there's some focused on kind of food security, nature-based solutions, climate adaptation, so quite a range of them have emerged. Some of them are next generation implementations of the Just Energy Transition partnerships, where I think they may have launched with bilateral funding commitments, but are now evolving into a platform approach that can, in an ongoing way, coordinate and mobilize lots of finance to support national energy transition plans. So those are a few there listed. I think others people talk about are Senegal, Vietnam, um, in any case. But if there's others that you're tracking or aware of, we'd love to hear that in the chat or the discussion we'll do in a few minutes. There is a lot of active interest in cultivating and supporting countries that are interested in country platforms. I think the San Giorgio group that's been tracking some of this is actively tracking as many as 20 or more new country platforms that are under either development or strong consideration. I think we'll likely see quite a few announcements around the G20 meetings later this year and COP30. The graphic there shows some information on the Brazil platform and the governance structure that's evolved. And one thing that we're beginning to explore and profile is what do these different country platforms look like, and how are they integrating programmatic approaches into the way that they work and operate, and looking at different aspects, whether it's governance structures, the ways that they enable a more comprehensive programmatic approach. And so that's another key feature of the scoping study that we've been working on, is to really profile some of these early platforms and to raise some questions about how institutional programmatic approaches might interface with these country level programmatic approaches. Angela, if you want to go to the next slide. What this slide does is it lists on the left side some areas where there do seem to be some points of needing coordination, elements of a programmatic approach that, as multiple institutions, MDBs, multilateral climate funds connect with country platforms, here's some areas to pay attention to about how these different programmatic approaches can fit or work together and really enable that interoperability, so that we're not getting significantly different approaches to how programmatic approaches are executed in ways that might either create redundancies, inefficiencies, et cetera. This is all recognizing that there's a lot of diversity and there's no one size fits all approach to a country platform, but at least I think identifying where these potential friction or opportunity coordination points we see as a powerful opportunity to really enhance the way that multilateral actors can plug into country platforms efficiently. And those include plan alignment, to what extent do the institutions require countries to develop standalone plans, or are there ways to use common shared plans so we don't have this proliferation or redundancy of plans? Ways to align technical assistance and capacity building support in ways that really support the country platform development and aren't adjacent to it. Thinking about kind of shared support and capacities around stakeholder engagement, um, shared work on project pipeline development, and then screening how to ensure projects actually align back with the programmatic approach in the country platform, and what are the techniques that work there. Um, Co-financing, how to efficiently connect and collaborate, and there's been some exciting advances on that, including some online portals to really enable that type of blended finance creation more frequently or more efficiently. Alignment also on monitoring, reporting, evaluation, and learning. And then this need for really thinking about how do we enable rapid learning within countries and across countries through use of learning platforms and knowledge hubs that bring together both these multilateral institutions and country governments and other partners like philanthropy and civil society. So these are some of the types of areas that we see a lot of opportunity to explore from a interoperability standpoint. Go to the next slide, and we're almost done here, and we'll open it up for discussion in a minute. One of the things we've been trying to do is identify what are the recommendations or opportunities for future analysis and action. These are just a few high-level ones. In the scoping study, we're trying to elaborate or arrange more of things that the climate investments funds can do to really advance how their programmatic approach and what they've been learning of it can evolve in the future, and how it can connect with other institutions' programmatic approaches and country platforms. We do see since the study that we've been doing is largely based on evaluation evidence and kind of desk analysis of written information, including on country platforms, there is an opportunity to bring in more implementation experience, which is accumulating very rapidly as more institutions are using a programmatic approach. And now that we've got a few country platforms online who are moving into implementation phase, I think that there's also really building out some of these some shared ways to talk proactively about these interoperability opportunities, and where there are ways that different elements of programmatic approaches can be aligned to work together in more seamless ways, and an opportunity for the CIF to articulate how its services work, TA facilities, et cetera, can really enable and can be in support of country platforms. I think there's a race right now by the MDBs and the multilateral climate funds to articulate how they can help, but the more that can happen in coordinated ways, the better. And that really gets to the joint efforts and opportunities that we see. And I think we'll probably see more convenings and workshops over the coming months that really begin to look at some of these. And the aim with the scoping paper is to provide a foundation for discussion that references how multiple institutions are approaching the programmatic approach, and how we see multiple of these emerging country platforms configuring around a programmatic approach. So then we can talk about how they all can work together in more powerful ways. So with that, I'm going to turn it to Nasibe, and she's going to open it up for questions, and we'd love to get some discussion going as well and hear about what you're seeing out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. We know it was a lot of information in a short amount of time, but if you have any questions about our findings, or, Alfredo is here, so if you have questions on the CIF programmatic approach, please raise your hand, open your mics, type it in the chat. As we are advancing in deepening the learning and the understanding of programmatic approaches, not for the sake of understanding the programmatic approaches only, but also as Tim was mentioning, how can we bring this work into the evolving climate finance architecture? So we have a couple of questions. First is, what are your experiences? We want to hear from you. What are your experiences operating or interacting with programmatic approaches? key challenges, structural tensions, things that we can explore, and how can they better support, because they already support country ownership, but how can they be better? Also, what are some key components of the programmatic approaches that can enable countries to more fully own their programs and projects? We know that that's the basis for these approaches, but of course, when implementation is happening, things can vary and context can vary. So what are the tweaks that can happen to these approaches to be better responding to countries' needs? And finally, as Tim was explaining, there are different programmatic approaches. We have the World Bank, we have the NDC partnership, GCF, JEF, somewhat nascent adaptation fund programmatic approach. So how can we get them to align and become operational among them, so as to, provide an easier operation environment for the countries, avoid gaps, inefficiencies, redundancies, and delays? How can they be more collaborative? So I'm just gonna open up the floor for anyone that has questions, comments. You can take a minute or two to think. Who were quiet this morning?
There are a few colleagues here that I'm familiar, work with multiple countries, and all the way from MDBs to consultants that have experience in multiple countries. So I will definitely encourage you to speak a little bit about your experience, and if you are aware about additional country platforms or programmatic approaches that are happening um, throughout the world or the region, or based on your experience, that it will definitely be complement what Raw Strategic is leading in this document.
Yeah, absolutely. Our search was not entirely exhaustive, so maybe there are some other programmatic approaches, or I see some colleagues from countries that can also share their experiences operating this or their needs in future operations of country platforms and programmatic approaches. In the meantime, Alfredo, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot, but I'm going to. I don't know if you want to share a little bit of if you have some experience working with other programmatic approaches with other institutions in the context of CIF's own programmatic approach.
I think something that has come out a lot in the evaluations that we've been doing in the past, so namely SREP evaluation, FIP midterm evaluation, the PPCR evaluation that we're about to launch, and others, is that the programmatic approach is extremely valuable, particularly when you kick off an investment plan and you're trying to align multiple projects within it. But also, most of the evaluations also end up affirming, for instance, that there is a big challenge when it comes to maintaining the programmatic approach through the implementation of those projects, and that sometimes projects start miscommunicating or stop communicating through their implementation process, and the programmatic approach gets diluted. And that's obviously a challenge that we need to address at CIF, and that we're trying our best to address at CIF with different approaches and participating in different operational modalities with our partners. But we believe it's important to maintain. So just putting this here because I mean, we have a lot of different partners here that I can see. I can see observers, MDB's countries again, and others. And I would like to know if you have any ideas, for instance, on how to maintain the programmatic approach through the implementation of of the projects, and not just to keep it at the beginning or at the kickoff when developing an investment plan.